What's up, everyone? It's Matt Morozic, and this will be the second work in progress on the Deadpool kit offered by Joe Do Couto. So the first one was all prep work, and here we are again in primer. I went ahead and just sprayed them in the Krylon Max Primer just because I didn't want to deal with the Stano-Res boogers, and it looks really good. So I only noticed one little spot, two little spots here and there that I need to go and sand out a little bit. Nothing big, but he's pretty good. He's like 99.9% ready. I got one little rust spot underneath here, the armpit. I'm going to sand out, and then I got like a booger I missed earlier on the back of the leg here, and then I think he'll be ready to start painting. So the first color that's going to get painted is red. So I'm going to do things a little differently than I have been doing as far as my step process. The first thing I'm going to do is once I get those two little areas stand out, I'm going to base coat everything in white. Normally in my past I would base coat everything black and then add highlights, but recently I've been base coating in white and adding shadows. I did that on a piece recently and it worked out pretty well, so I kind of like the way it looks. So we're going to do that, and I'll probably just use a rattle can for the base coat white, just to save time. I think it'll go quicker. So so I'm going to take them all apart because I'm going to paint everything separately. So this Krylon has had, let's see, I put this on last night pretty late. I mean, it's dried almost 24 hours, which is more than enough. I'm going to have to change this out. I got such a long pin in here. I don't need such a long pin in that hand, that switch out hand. And then also I've got a really long pin in this hand for the shotgun, and probably what I'll do is, again, it doesn't need to be so long. I probably won't glue this on. I'll probably just cut this short so for shipping purposes, because that's a really long kind of thing to try to pack and not have break. So I'll probably just cut this pin short, and that way Joe can put it on when he gets it. It'll be a tight fit. So no, the only magnet I'm going to put, which I haven't done, is I'm going to put a magnet back here for the katanas. So all that sanding and prep work I did on all the pouches turned out good. I didn't see any more cleanup on those. So my buddy Randy Van Dyke made a comment on my Facebook page, because I posted the work in progress to my Matt's Models Custom Facebook page, and he said I say it all the time, and he just reiterated that even this is a very good kit. That being said, it does need some prep. It needs some work. It's not just it doesn't show up and it's ready to paint. You gotta spend the time to go through and, you know, fix the mold. You know, just like I said in the last video, you gotta fix the mold. You know, take care of the mold lines, fix any pinholes or bubbles, and so it's the main reason I do the videos. I know a few guys enjoy seeing the process. You know, the few guys that actually watch these. And get something out of it other than just me making mistakes and cussing a lot. But a few guys get something out of it and learn something, which is good. But it's really mostly for my clients, so they see the work that goes into their project. I've said that over and over again. So yeah. So I'm going to take this all apart. I'm going to sand out those few little areas, and then we're going to base coat it in white. And once that white dries, we're going to go in and add some shadows, and then once we do that, we will spray the red on top of that. And the white base coat with the shadows sprayed in, you'll see all that shading underneath the red. So it's a kind of a cool technique that I do. Yeah, so that's where I am. So when I come back, he'll be base coated in white, and we'll add some shadows. Okay, so next up on Deadpool is to do the red. So what I did is I'll just show you one part. What I did is after I got everything prepped as best as I could, I went through and I hit everything real lightly with some white primer, just a rattle can primer, and then I went in with Mr. Color white and put down a white base coat. So I'm doing this a little backwards of what I normally do. A lot of times I do red, I'll spray a dark base coat, add highlights, and then go in and do red. But I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to start with my highlights and kind of do shadows and then go from there. So, like, here's a foot. And as I was doing, I found some more pinholes. So like on the bottom of the foot, I filled all these in. Even though you're not going to see them, they're filled in now. Hopefully they'll look okay once painted. But so as everyone knows, we got this awesome thing going right now, COVID thing going on, which has also affected the ability to get certain hobby supplies. So normally I stock up on Mr. Color is probably one of my favorite paints. I would use this and Jesse's Garage Kits paints are like my two favorite. Anytime I'm doing a lot of shading, I will go with the Mr. Color paints simply because I can over thin it and it atomizes really well and I get a really smooth transition. The acrylic paints they don't atomize as finely even if you thin them. So it's harder to get a smooth transition in my opinion and from my experience. Other guys may disagree, but this is back from my Gunpla days, just using Mr. Colors all the time. So my go-to red is usually this Mr. Color GX Red number 3. It's a great color. It's relatively bright, and you adjust the tone of your red based on your base coat. So the darker the base coat, the darker the red. The brighter the base coat, the brighter the red. It's like that with any color. So your base coat has a huge effect on the top coat color. So for this Deadpool, what I'm thinking about doing is, if this was a Gundam, I would probably go in and add shadows with a black. This is semi-gloss black, and I also bought some smoke gray, which is basically black. It's just, actually that's a clear color. I didn't even realize that. It doesn't say clear, but it is. It's a clear color. So I'm not going to use that because it's a clear color. So I would normally go in and I would add all my shadows with black. And again, normally I would buy Mr. Color GX number 2 black, but you can buy it in my hobby store and getting it online is tough right now. Another color I like to use for red as a shadow or darker color is russet. This is a real nice kind of rusty red. So this is nice also, or a brown. Now I use propeller brown quite a bit, and I also bought some Tamiya just straight up brown, so that way, because red can get muddy really quick with black, so it's better to use something in a warmer tone. So that's why brown makes a good shadow color undertone for red, or another just darker red tone. So what I'm thinking about doing is not doing the black. I want this a little brighter than I normally do. I also bought some of the Vallejo Mecha colors. I bought a black and I bought a dark red. I've only used these a few times, but the great thing about these is you can thin these with Mr. Color Thinner. All these paints you can thin with Mr. Color Thinner. Obviously the Mr. Color paints, Tamiya you can thin with Mr. Color paint Thinner, which I didn't know till about a few years ago. Someone had recommended. If you're having a hard time finding colors, look in Tamiya range, but I didn't know I could thin it with Mr. Color Thinner. And then also, I was trying out the Vallejo Mega Colors a while ago and having problems getting them to spray right, and like thin it with Mr. Color Thinner. So even though Mr. Color paint, so all the Mr. Color paints are lacquer paints, meaning they need a lacquer thinner. So all these paints right here, Mr. Color, you have to thin with a lacquer thinner, whether it's Mr. Color Thinner or Gaia Notes Thinner. I know some guys that have used like hardware thinner, but that's really harsh. You can do it, but the hobby thinners are much milder. Now, so these are pure acrylic or pure lacquers. You cannot thin these with alcohol or water or an acrylic thinner. You will get a mess. So if we put those aside, the great thing about the Vallejo colors and the Tamiya colors is that you can thin these with their own thinner, or you can thin them with Mr. Color Thinner. I think even Tamiya makes their own lacquer thinner, which I've never used, but I've always used the Mr. Color Thinner because it's really mild and it does a great job. So these, even though these say acrylic on them, they're actually a hybrid. They're an acrylac, meaning you can thin them with a lacquer thinner, or you can thin them with their own proprietary thinner. Every time I've tried to thin an acrylic with either alcohol or water, I just get sand. I just get sandpaper texture, and like, when I was first trying it, it really turned me off to trying to use acrylics. Until a few of my friends said, "Hey, you can thin those with Mr. Color Thinner." I tried it, and then it sprays like butter. So nice little trick there. So I think what I'm going to do for the red on Deadpool, since I want a brighter color, I think what I might do is I might do a custom mix for the shadow. And I usually don't do custom mix simply because if I run out of paint, I don't have to remix it or try to match it. So I think what I'm going to do is I think I want to mix a little russet. I want a dark red, and I couldn't. They didn't have a real dark red. This may be the right color. This will dry down a little bit, but there's not much in here. I got a big figure, so I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to mix a little of the russet with a little of this semi-gloss black. It'll give me a dark red. So I'm just going to kind of, I wish I had a paint stirrer here. I don't. Let's see if I can use this. Is this messy? Just make sure there's no pigment. Make sure there's no pigment in the bottom. So I'm going to mix this up. Actually, I should probably go through a whole bottle of this. It's a big piece. I don't know, maybe not. Usually this step doesn't take a lot of paint, but if I do go through it, I'll mix up. So I'm going to do a whole bottle of the russet, and I'm just going to do a little bit of black. There's no 2-to-1 ratio. I'm just going to add a little black to it. I really want like a kind of a rusty red. Now this will dry darker too. I'm going to just do a little bit more black. That way my shadows aren't straight black with red on top. It's got a warm reddish tone to them. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So if I take this and I just kind of put some of the russet on top. I'm not sure if you can see the difference there in tone. But it's now about, I don't know, I may do it a little darker. I don't want it black. That's probably about right. This is probably really close to the Vallejo color. Let's see. Oh, it's a little darker. So I think this will work well for the shadows. So let me ball these up. Paper towel. So again, no ratio, so don't ask me, what's the ratio of red to black? The ratio is until it gets to where I want it to be. I always get asked, what's your thinning ratio? The thinning ratio is when it sprays the way I want it to be. What's your ratio on this? It's until it's where I want it to be. I don't keep track of ratios, I don't write notes down. I know a lot of guys keep excessive notes of paint colors and mixtures and stuff. I just don't do that. I have a hard enough time just getting something done. Okay. So we're going to work on this here. I'm going to work on top of this towel. I'm going to get a glove on since I got some white. I got white parts. And I'm not going to do a ton of this on camera because this process will take a while. But I just want to give you the sense of what we're going to do. And I'm going to put some thin in here. So I do kind of a starting ratio with thinner. It's usually for the normal Mr. Color paints. It's usually around 1 part paint to 1.5 parts thinner. Again, I thin it till it sprays until it sprays the way I want it to spray. When I'm doing this kind of thing where I'm doing shading and stuff, I'll typically over thin it a little bit. I'd rather do multiple layers and have it atomized the way I want, rather than and then you just get smoother transitions. So you probably heard this before, but a good rule of thumb is the consistency of skim milk. That's actually a really good rule of thumb for most paints. More. So I'm gonna have way more paint than I need for the step, so I'll put this in a bottle and mark it. I will label the bottle like Deadpool shadow color. Alright, let's see how that sprays. So I just got my Iwata HPCS Plus airbrush. I've got a bunch of airbrushes. I think I own like 9 in total, if not more. Airbrushes I like, just the airbrushes I have, and I have them for different reasons. So I've got a bunch of Iwatas. I've got 3, maybe 4 of the Ken Badger's chromes. I really like the chromes. Air pressure, again, it's just until it sprays the way I want it to spray. So I'm just testing this on my hand right now. I'm adjusting the needle stop back here. That's one of the reasons I like this airbrush. The needle stop is super easy to use. So I can get in tight and adjust my air pressure, bring it down a little bit. Like that. Okay, so a good part to start on would be a foot, because it's small and it's easy to get in frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in here, and I'm actually going to turn one of my lights away. I like to have oblique lighting when I'm doing this step, because as I turn this piece in the light, it shows me all the shapes. If everything's lit from all around, it flans out the piece. I can't really see all the different shapes. When you take a light away, like that, now you can see some shapes. So that's kind of what I typically do. Put just a little bit more on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to start hitting the shadows. The deeper the shadow, the harder I hit it. So I'll hit the deepest recesses first. Okay, so I'm getting a little more thinner. Not quite coming out. So we're gonna add a little more thinner. I just cleaned this airbrush, so it should spray pretty good. Yeah, I got way more paint than I'm going to need for this step. This step doesn't take a lot of paint. I'm going to go get one thing real quick. So one thing when you're dealing with the Mr. Color paints, do not mix them in these little plastic cups, they'll melt. Also, even in this little wax cup, it will start to affect the wax lining. So I bought from my local auto body supply store, I bought a case of these mixing cups, and I don't use them very often. I think I get like 50 of them for like 20 bucks. So they come in real handy because they're solvent proof. Okay, there we go. There we go. So I'll hit the deepest recesses first. And then I'll go in and hit let's do a little shadow down here. Someday I'll have a spray booth where I don't get any dust on my paint. But that's not the case right now. I get dust in my paint all the time, unfortunately. And there's really no avoiding it. So if the shadow's bigger, I back off and make it softer. Go around the ankle there. Pretty soft shadow here, so I'm just going to put a little bit on. Don't want it too dark. So if you've followed my videos before, red is really crappy at hiding. It doesn't cover well, so we use that to our advantage when we do this. So I'm going to spray the top color on here. You'll see all this shading underneath it. So I'm going to spray from the bottom of the sole up the side of the foot like this, and I'll just fade that in a little bit. Kind of creates a false shadow to give it some weight. And that's about it for this foot, I think. Let's see. I'm seeing a little shape right here. A little bit right there. And I'm just constantly turning this in the light. And now I'll do the other foot so they're similar. So right here in this area of the foot, we're going to darken that just a hair, because that would be a little darker. And that looks pretty good. So there you go. So that's what that looks like. Doesn't look like anything now, but once we put the top color on there, it's going to look really good. I'm also going to put a little shadow right here where it meets the top of the ankle. Because there is a kind of a leather trim that goes up here, and I'll just create a little shadow underneath that trim. Just like that. So I'm going to do the other foot. I'm going to put this one right here. And the Mr. Color paint dries pretty much instantly, so I can put it down. And it will not get affected. Now if I sprayed it and put it down right away, it would be affected, but if you give it 15-20 seconds, it's dry enough, you can set it down. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing on this guy. This has a few different wrinkles in it than the other one, so it's a little different skull. Because it's in a different position. I'm not sure if you can see, but since I have such a oblique side lighting, I'm seeing all these shapes here that I wouldn't see if I had lights going on every direction. Depending on which direction you hold the airbrush and the piece, it'll just kind of naturally fade anyway. So that's why I'm usually not real tight unless I'm doing a face or something and I'm trying to get little wrinkles. I'm backed off quite a bit. I mean, I do a lot of kind of soft shapes. It's just more natural. Some, 3 or 4 inches away from this piece. So where I went in, where I will go in first, like these areas where I initially went in, as I go over this piece, those just get a little bit darker, which is what I want, because that's how it happened. As it gets a more recessed or a deeper area of this part, it would be a darker shadow. So as I go over these areas, those areas just get darker naturally from the spraying of the paint. So again, we're going to kind of come up from the bottom up here. Okay, so let's look at these two pieces and just make sure we're similar. Okay, so this side I'm gonna just so I match it a little bit more. I'm gonna come up from the bottom a little bit more. Even though they're exact, but we want it similar. So it's a consistent look throughout the whole piece. The one thing I really wish I could get from my local hobby store, my local hobby town carries Mr. Color paints, so it was great when they started carrying them a few years ago, because I was just ordering everything online, which sucked because you had to wait for it. They started carrying them and their prices were the same as online, and I know the owner fairly well, so he gives me a little discount. And if you're part of their modeling club, they gives you a little discount. So it's really handy that they're available locally and at the mail order, but now it's to the point where I want to continue using them at the mail order. So it looks pretty good. So those look pretty consistent. So let's put those to the side. And we'll work on the legs a little bit. If I can get them. Here are the legs. Again, there's some dust in here, but it's all I can do to keep dust out of my paint. So that's what flat coat's for. It'll hide a lot of that. It'll just bury it. Okay, same thing with the legs. I have to look at my references. I'm pretty sure these areas of the legs go black. I'm gonna look that up real quick. Because those areas I'm not gonna worry about shading in red. Those will get shaded again later. My buddy Randy Van Dyke posted a photo of his build up on my Matt's Models custom page, which I've been using as a reference because it's a good color reference. So let's see if I can find that. That's all Mary Jane stuff. Where is it? I know I saved it. Downloads? Images? There it is. Okay, so this is my buddy Randy Van Dyke's paint up. And yeah, so those areas go, so just to make sure I should just shade the red parts. So the crotch, these side pieces go black. Okay. Excuse me. So I'm just going to shade this crotch area and the parts that go red. So now here I'll get close because we got some really small wrinkles. I didn't adjust my air pressure. I just leave it the same. So way down here in the crotch, I'll hit it pretty heavy because that's going to be the darkest shadow. I keep a Q-tip nearby because if my airbrush decides to spit, like if it dislodges a piece of dirt in the airbrush, which it just did, even though I just cleaned it, I try to wipe that off pretty quick so I don't have to And here you can see I'm just kind of wisping it up. And now I'm going to back off and we're going to come up from the top, from the bottom up, and fade that up. I'm not hitting this part of this crotch. That's got a little bump on it, so we're gonna, a little bump. It's got a big bump, but we're gonna leave it there. So there's a highlight. So I'll do the legs on camera and then I'll just do the rest off camera because I think you get the idea. So these areas where I've got muscles and outfit to deal with, I'll go do the muscles first. There's a slight wrinkle here in his outfit, so I do the muscles first, and then I'll go back and add shape to the outfit. Again, because the muscles are deeper, be a deeper shadow. So any shading I do on top of the muscles will just add to that. And even though this part goes black, it's just easier if I kind of try to I'm trying to stop my airbrush. I just take it up into that muscle. Do a lot of detail in the knee, which you probably don't see. It's hard to get in here because I don't want to scratch the paint on the other leg with my airbrush, so gotta be careful. Because right now the paint's still pretty fragile. There's no top coat on it. There's a big calf muscle. I'll back off and soften that up a little bit. So a lot of little bumps and stuff sculpted in this piece that I'm just now seeing because I've got the lights set the way they are. My camera stopped recording because it only records 30 minutes at a time, so I'm not sure at what point it stopped recording, but anyway, because I wasn't watching the back of the camera. But I'm still continuing, just going in and hitting all these muscles. I was saying that I'm seeing a lot of little details and stuff in the piece that I didn't notice before because the way I have my lights set up right now. It's a big muscle right here. Just going to back off real light. Same thing here with the thigh. So this is a real harsh line right here. I don't want that. I'm going to blend that up a little bit. Just like that. So the trick is to go in and kind of get all the harsh spots first, and then going back and blend it in a little bit based on your preference. This is just how I like it to look. So that looks looking pretty good. Got a little bit over here I have to do still. So I'm backed off quite a ways right now, so I want this calf muscle to be nice and blended in. I'm going to shadow down here by the ankle. And then this little strip right here, between this detail goes red, so I'm going to do that pretty dark. Shadow. Like that. Okay. So this leg looks pretty good. Let's do the butt. And we'll add a shadow right here by the waist. And here, like so. I'm going to back off and kind of spray up. Give it a nice natural shape. Deadpool's got a nice butt, let's show it off. Every time you see me wipe, as there's dust in the white paint, so I'm trying to get as much of it out as I can, because even though you're not going to see it in the end, because by the time I flat cut everything, and the dust actually gets buried in the paint, and you just never notice it. But ideally, you don't get dust in your paint, but you know, we don't have a commercial dust-free spraying environment, unfortunately. It's just a kind of real free-flowing process. I just kind of turn in the piece, looking at all the different areas that have little details, and try to get as many as you can. Inevitably, you're going to miss, you know, something, but do our best to get them all. Again, I'm going to back off and soften that calf up. So all the areas that go black, look at the same process but with black, and I'll probably, again, base coat like in a really dark gray, and then hit the shadows with black. That way just black has got some shape. I mentioned over here there's a little wrinkle in the suit, so I'm just going to just real lightly do that. And so now you see two little highlights right there in the wrinkle of the suit. It's very subtle, but it's on top, so it's got to be subtle.
So you can see if it's a wrinkle, if it's a small wrinkle and it's deep, I get real close. Again, I'm not adjusting my air pressure. I'm just kind of let the paint flow and do its natural thing. It'll naturally soften the transitions if you just let it. Now, if you want really, really tight shadows, you lower the air pressure and get super tight, and you can get little lines. I think that works for some subjects, but I think when you're doing big figures like this, the softer the better. The big shadow right here, just kind of fade that in. So the magic happens when you start putting on the top coat. This all blends together because it looks a little jarring at first before you start putting the top coat on. Like, that looks like crap. Once you start laying that top coat in, it all blends together. So I'm just going to do the legs here on camera, and then I'll do the rest off camera, the torso and the hands. And then we'll let it dry for, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes. And then we'll do the top coat, but I'm almost done here with the legs. It's looking really good. So if you know the difference here between the sides, this has kind of been blended in, softened up, and this side isn't. So now I'm going to go in and start softening some of these transitions like this. Just so it's not a harsh line. So that I'm spraying from the shadow to the highlight. That's what's giving me that nice transition. Right here, there's a little wrinkle in the suit, so we're gonna again kind of highlight that. A little subtle. Okay, that's looking pretty good. A little shape right here, see? Okay. Now we'll get those two sides together. This could be a little softer right here. I'll really hit this hard. But there in the crotch. That should be the darkest area. Okay, so that's basically that step. So that's the feet and the legs, and that's looking pretty good. So I'm gonna go through and do the torso and the hands, and then we'll let them dry for a little bit, and then we'll spray the top coat. Alright, it's going to be a little loud because I'm in the spray booth right now, but we're going to start putting on the base coat. So like, here's the head after I did all the shading. And it looks a little wonky right now. So I mixed up kind of a custom color, Mr. Color Reds. And so what I do when I do this is it's very important that I get the same amount of coverage on every piece. So I'll put a coat on this, put it aside, put a coat on the next piece, put it on the side, and it needs to keep going around. So I'm just going to do this. Just like that. Now I'll do the next piece. Go on the hands. I just want to make sure I get even coverage. Like that. end. Tighter. Like that. I'm just trying to get it to look even. And then what I do is I compare all the pieces and then I add more paint where needed. Oh, I already did that one. Feet. It's gonna focus. It's focusing. Trying to focus. You see all that shading you can still see all that shading we did. This is hard to get down here in the crotch area to make sure it's even. I'm gonna put my mask on. Real hard to get down in there between the legs. That's the trickiest part. Again, to try to make sure it's real even. That's the tricky part with this technique, and making sure that your top coat's even. That's pretty good for that. At the torso. that shading there that I did? Nothing else mixed up. A good way to get this stuff evened out is once you kind of get it on there, is you just fan it on real light, and that just kind of helps even it out. But that's the first coat on everything. Now we're going to go back and do a second coat. And this may be enough for the look I want. That's a real good red. So now I'm going to just fan this on, kind of even it out. And that's about where I want to be. So 2 coats and then kind of fan it. That looks really good. Put it on, and then I'm going to fan it, help even it out. And if I see a light spot, or a spot that I can see the white too much, I just fan over that one spot a little bit. And then we'll check it against my head, and we're pretty much spot on. Focus. Not autofocus. And then I'll check it against the other foot, and we're looking good. on to help even it out. Good. I'm not sure if the shading is showing up in camera, but it usually doesn't in my videos. So it looks really good in person. Okay, I'm going to stand it on. Does it just spreads out the paint really evenly, real light, and it just evens out any heavy or light spots. It just kind of blends it all together really well. Get the legs. Some of these big pieces. Still having a hard time getting paint. The inner thigh. So it's real hard to get paint on the inner thigh because the way that it's angled, it's hard to get an airbrush in there without getting extra paint somewhere else. With here on the inner calf, it's real hard to get paint there. The angle's just weird. Because I don't want to get too much paint somewhere else, but I want to make sure that that's actually red, not white. So I'm struggling with that right now a little bit. I think this looks pretty good. Again, the fanning it on really helps just smooth it out. That's pretty good. Again, I'm not sure if this is showing up in camera, but the chain looks real nice. Going with that dark red shadow, just gives it a real nice natural paint to it, so if I used black, it would have been muddy. Or straight black. I didn't mix this with red and black, so. That looks good. And on a big piece like this, I just constantly check it for evenness. Make sure I got everything looking as evenly as possible. Now with the legs together, it's real hard to get paint where I need it. This is a good Deadpool color. I like it. Not too bright, not too dark. I think it's right in the middle. Yeah, it's looking good. And the torso again. There's a lot less red on Deadpool than I realized. I was thinking I had a lot of red to paint, and then I looked at the color reference, and it's a pretty even mix of red and black. So I've got a lot of extra paint mixed up for this that I'm going to save because I'm going to do the second Deadpool for a client of mine, and I'll probably do a similar to this because so far I'm liking the way this looks. I don't have enough to do a whole second one, but I can just mix up some more paint. Do the second one. Okay, now we'll fan this on. Make sure I get the key really good. Put the head on, I won't put the head on because it's got to dry, but put the head next to this, make sure that it matches the torso well, and I'll get the legs next to it, make sure that they match well. I just fan it on until it looks even. And I'm putting very little paint on, so this fanning technique doesn't really change the color or the intensity. It just really evens it out because it's going on really, really light. Again, some areas are just hard to get paint to because where they're located, under the arms. Okay. So let's see what the head looks like next to that. Actually, I can put it on. Yeah, it matches really well. Nice shading. Legs next to it. Oh crap. Alright, well I got some touch up there, just in my idiocy trying to see if this match. I just scratched the paint a little bit so I can fix that. But we're looking pretty good. Alright. So now I can touch up this paint a little bit. Let's see if I can do it right here. I meant to go back on the shadow color a little bit there. Yeah, I nicked the paint just a hair. So I'm going to fix that, blend it in, and then we're going to let this dry really well. I'm going to seal it, and I'm going to let it dry overnight before I do any masking, because I'm going to mask off with the black next. So I'm going to call this work in progress done. It's the red. Next one will be doing black. So as always, thanks for watching. We'll catch you guys next time.